All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Chuck Clark, Director of Development for the City of Lackawanna. Mayor Iafallo, unfortunately, is unable to join us this evening. Tonight's public hearing is being conducted to allow for public comment on proposed updates and refinements to the city's zoning code. The Department of Development, in partnership with CNS Companies, has been working on this grant-funded project administered by New York Department of State since January of 2024. The grant period for this project ends on December 31st of this year, at which time all related work and approvals must be completed. To that end, and given the multiple sections of our zoning code, tonight's session is the third of 5 public meetings that were scheduled and will run through the end of May. As required by New York State Municipal Home Rule Law, a notice was published on April 17th, 2026 in Buffalo Business First, the city's official newspaper, as well as the city's website, bulletin boards, and public venues. Everyone in attendance is asked to register at the front of the room and indicate if you desire to speak. Speakers will be respectfully asked to reserve their comments to no more than 5 minutes. I will be co-leading tonight's meeting with Tom Voigt, who's our planner project partner from CNS, and also in the crowd is Steve Balin from City Code Enforcement. With that said, before we get into questions and comments from the public, I would like to ask Tom to spend just a few minutes quickly summarizing a conversation that we had regarding the material that has been out for review.
Yeah, so hello everybody, thanks for joining us tonight. As Chuck mentioned, we got together with the steering committee about a week ago to talk over the draft language. There's various things that the steering committee wanted changed within that, so there's been some changes to specific parts, a little bit of adjustment of language in some of the definitions. We talked about some of the things that the city maybe was more palatable, or maybe was more palatable for the city than some other things that we had written, but we had a good discussion, and just like that meeting, really the purpose of today is to have a conversation about some of these things. We don't want the language that's proposed to feel like this is a yes or no. It's really more of, we're here to talk about some of the things that are written and how we can accomplish what's best for the city.
Great. So, Gene, is there a sheet, sign-in sheet? Thank you very much. No one has checked that they want to speak.
I would like to speak.
Okay, if I just make my way down quickly, Carl, do you plan on? No, okay. Grace, I assume. Tim?
No.
Mr. Morano wants to speak. Mr. Surdek?
Yeah, I got a couple questions.
Okay, then I will check Mr. Morano first, Mr. Surdek, and Ms. Muflahi, since are you going to speak at all? Yes. Okay, so first up, Mr. Morano.
Thanks, Chuck. Thank you for your preliminary comments, and I was glad to hear that this is a work in progress, because this particular section, although I read it, a lot of stuff was just bouncing off of me and not, it was difficult to digest for me for some reason. But in particular, I was glad to see the structure of the one section regarding businesses in homes. And I think that may need to be revisited at another time. So, and I know the council has the final approval here, and so that should give us another opportunity, or if there's ongoing dialogue regarding some of the language here, then I'm sure you'll keep us informed to that end. If you take a look at Part 8, Additional Use Requirements, on page 2, section 8-4, accessory structures, and then if you go to Part 2, word usage and definitions, also on page 2 where it says accessory dwelling unit, can you reconcile the language in those two sections for me?
Sure.
Because they seem to be disparate and contradictory, and might create a problem in interpretation later on down the road.
Sure. So accessory structures really is the overarching umbrella of things that are established that are kind of incidental to the principal use, right? So in maybe the easiest example I can think of single-family home as a principal use. An accessory structure would be a detached garage, shed, oftentimes a swimming pool, depending on how that's codified. The accessory dwelling unit is a separate dwelling unit on the same parcel as a single-family home. So the accessory use or structure is the catch-all for kind of anything that's incidental to a principal building.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but let me be more specific.
Yeah.
In 8-4 accessory structures, it says shall be a minimum of 10 feet.
Yep.
In the other language, an accessory dwelling unit, it says that separate dwelling unit that is within or substantially attached to a principal residential dwelling. It seems to be implied that there's, it's got to be part of the original structure.
Yes.
Can you see where the confusion is in my mind?
Sure. There's generally two types of accessory dwelling units, attached and detached. Based on the conversations we've had, attached was the easiest one to kind of think about how that would look in the city. To do that, we can't necessarily require it to be separated and to be attached at the same time. So I understand what you're saying. This language in section 8-4 for accessory structures has to apply to all accessory structures, whereas the accessory dwelling units in particular have to be substantially attached from the home. So there's no way they can meet.
It doesn't say that.
It says they have to be substantially attached or within.
Well, isn't it contradicted to the accessory structures? Or shouldn't language be put in section 8-4 that says accepting the language under accessory dwelling units herein?
It can, yeah. We can say that.
Because otherwise I just think it creates some confusion. I could be wrong, but like I say, it's just a thought on my part.
Just to be clear, too ambiguous, Fred, or just opens it up to a misinterpretation?
Well, yeah, I mean, perhaps the best way to put it is you guys are close enough to this to know what you're talking about when you're conveying amongst yourselves what the intent of this section is. Somebody like me reading it on a first impression might say, wait a minute, 8-4 here says it's got to be a 10-foot minimum, but when you come to a structure for a dwelling, it says it's got to be attached or there's no distance requirement. So maybe a little clarification might make it easier in the future for enforcement purposes.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
And that's really all I have, so thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Mr. Sirdike. Yes, sir.
Tom, how are you?
Good.
I was reading over this non-conforming structures on
The Part 9 document?
Part 9.
Yep.
Yeah.
page 3. You got here that if they're damaged or destroyed by any means where cost of repairs exceeds 50% or more of the assessed value as assessed by the city taxes on the last previous assessment roll shall be rebuilt. And if it's less than, more than 50%, it can't be rebuilt. Less than 50%, it can be.
Yes.
But that's you're basing it on the city's assessed tax rolls, which are, I mean, our property's gone way up in the last 4 or 5 years. Would that affect it? Would that be something that would be legally challenged? You know what I'm getting?
Yeah, I think he makes a good point. I mean, without a reval, which is something that should be done on a regular basis, it may cause some confusion in trying to set a value as to what 50% is or less than 50%.
Right.
So yeah, I think he makes a good point.
Yeah, right now I'm going through getting new home insurance, and it's like crazy. I mean, what our property's worth compared to 4 or 5 years ago.
Would market value be a more acceptable
Something
term,
where-
Tom?
Yeah, I guess the only difference I would say with market value is that's constantly in flux, and is probably would require an arbitrator to set a value, right? Because if you're the homeowner, you're saying this is my market value, and if you are the insurance company, you're saying no, this is your market value. So there's going to be competing interests in that, especially when you're trying to file an insurance claim for damage over 50%. You'd figure probably is either 75% or a total loss, which really is the intent to say if your house burns down and it's non-conforming, when it gets rebuilt, it's got to conform to the new standards, right? And anything less than a substantial reconstruction of the home, you can keep your non-conforming status and rebuild what you had. So maybe there's a different way to write this where it's not dependent on value.
What about if it was the determination of the insurance underwriter?
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say, what would be the course? And I'm sorry, I never asked you this question.
Yeah, no.
Would this be more appropriately worded if we looked at the insurance process and how they would determine a loss claim?
Certainly. And really that just becomes a question of who does the city want inserted into this effort to get a structure rebuilt? Do you want to have to rely on an insurance underwriter to make a determination of a non-conforming use, right? Because they're going to be the ones to say, you can rebuild it or you can't, or this is how much money it's going to cost. Really, the city should be the ones in control to say, you're substantially reconstructing this to a point where we feel like you need to meet the new code or not, right? And allowing an insurance underwriter to put a value on that is having them dictate the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I see, and not to interrupt you, Kevin, but
No, go ahead.
I
Pretty
think
much done.
needing some kind of a benchmark to start with is what you're aiming at.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that might be subject to interpretation and challenge anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And what if a property is underinsured, right? What do you do then?
Right.
Right?
Or not insured, right.
Or not
Right.
insured.
So that's a good question. Let me take a look at some different ways to do this. I think that's a good question.
And to Kevin's point, if you look at the equalization rate, in the city, just in the last 6 going on 7 years, I mean, it's
Oh, yeah.
as property market values have gone up, that's gone down, quite a bit. So that's as much of a moving target, Tom, I guess is my point. As Lackawanna properties catch up with the market, so maybe a little more research on that.
Yeah.
Because assessed value may be just as troublesome as insurance or market. right?
Yeah, I think the assessed value comes from that's a known number that the city has on demand, right? And it's a city record that you can rely on and say, this is what's on file in our assessor's office.
Well, that is true.
So it keeps that process internal to the city.
All right. Then I noticed there was a lot of windmill restrictions. Is there any place that they could put windmills in Lackawanna? I don't think there's any place left, you know what I'm getting at?
Other than the waterfront,
Yeah, right.
that's about it.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just one other point, for what it's worth, and I don't know if it's relevant or not, but we're in the process of attempting a review of the noise ordinance
Mhm.
as it currently exists. It needs to be updated. So I don't know if that plays into that language you have in there regarding noise.
Noise will be next month. Stay tuned. But there is certain provisions in the wind and solar to that point,
Yeah.
only because those things take a very specific set of regulation to make sure that when a project comes in of that magnitude that they're checking all the boxes. But there usually is an overarching noise ordinance that's enacted as part of the zoning that we'll take a look at with some of the other development stuff.
Right.
So just to give you, if there are no more speakers, just to give the audience here a heads up of what's coming. We've got one more sectional review, like what we have here. And then that will complete the sectional reviews. And then after that, so that will be in June. In July, there will be the first collected draft of all of this, all of the feedback, all of the different commentary that we've received. And that will be the starting point for hopefully coming to a final draft at some point to allow submission to the state, because this is a smart growth grant, so the state has to take a look at it as well. The goal here is to get done, obviously, excuse me, before the end of the year, because that's when the grant runs out. So Tom's expertise and help, are all dependent upon that. So just so you have an expectation that this will not keep going on, forever and ever here, you've got one more sectional review, and then that'll be in June. In July, you will have a first collective draft, and then again brought before a similar forum here. It then goes to the state. We incorporate any of their comments, and then sometime before the end of the year, it will be before the council to act or not, accordingly as it sees fit.
Great.
Are there any other? If there are no other speakers, I believe the meeting could be brought to a close. It'd be closed at 5:46. Thank you.